All right, good evening. Good evening. Welcome to this special meeting of Council for Thursday, April 7th, 2022. Please rise for the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Car ton bras s'est porté le pays, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Good evening. The land on which Council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this is a reminder that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of our Indigenous peoples. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Council, a special meeting of Council. I'd just like to acknowledge that Deputy Mayor Townsend will be chairing the meeting today. I'd like to send well wishes to Mayor Walter Sendzik, who is recovering after being diagnosed with COVID-19. We wish him well and a speedy recovery back to Council. We do know that he will be participating today, which shows how dedicated he is to our community and to our city. So welcome, Mayor Sendzik, and we wish you well. Additionally, I would like to acknowledge my ward mate and Councillor Sal Sorrento, who will be taking a leave of absence effective immediately as he focuses on his provincial election as he seeks to win a seat up at Queen's Park. And on behalf of Council, we wish him well. And yeah, that election will be coming up soon. So best of wishes to Councillor Sal Sorrento. I'm going to look to the adoption of the agenda. Over to their clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The following amendment is being made to this evening's agenda. In the staff report for item 5.2, the recommendation in the report states that Council authorize staff to provide comments to the Environmental Bill of Rights. The recommendation should state that Council authorize staff to provide comments to the Environmental Registry of Ontario. And that's it for this evening.
Are there any other amendments to this evening's agenda? I don't see any. Can I have a councillor move the agenda, please? I'll do Councillor Porter, Councillor Dodge. All in favor? Carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? Council chambers in all municipalities in our country represent the seed of local democracy. The many acts that govern us understand the necessity of the collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and to seek opinions into our very complex issues. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, the public to have an opportunity to participate, and all participants to be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another and question one another. But that we understand we do this in a way that never undermines any person's ability or their dignity in our chambers. And I will look to the clerk to read the reasons for going into closed session this evening.
Thank you. This evening, we are going into closed session for the following purposes: settlement of appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal, official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for 12 to 16, for 12 to 16 Locke Street and 12 Lakeport Road, Port Dalhousie Commercial Core and Harbour Area Secondary Plan, and Port Dalhousie Commercial Core and Harbour Area Heritage Conservation Plan. The purpose for that is litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or the local board. By attending the closed session, each member of council acknowledges that their obligations under the Code of Conduct, including responsibilities related to the confidentiality of closed session materials and discussions, remain the same as if they were physically present at the meeting. This includes that members of council are not permitted to record the proceedings and that they must ensure that no other person can see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place this evening. Thank you.
And moving the motion to move into closed session for the reason noted by City Clerk, I have Councillor Phillips, Councillor Harris, and all in favor? Opposed? All right, we're back in open session after a great conversation. I just have the motion put up on the screen. I have mover Councillor Miller, seconder.
I'll move. Sorry, can I second it?
Seconded Councillor Harris.
Sure.
Okay. So Planning and Building Services Services Settlement of Appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal, Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendments 1216 Locke Street and 12 Lakeport Road, Port Dalhousie Commercial Core and Harbour Area Secondary Plan, and Port Dalhousie Commercial Core and Harbour Area Heritage Conservation District Plan. I have that council authorize the city's external counsel to execute the minutes and settlement as outlined in Appendix 1. Do you have any questions?
Call the question.
And call the question to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
I will say no.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
A very big yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Mayor Senzik.
A long time coming. Yes, yes, yes.
And that's carried.
All right, thank you. And I'm just going to follow up and look for Director Cathay to provide some comments on this as well, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Townsend. I've always said that the best developments occur when the city, community, and developer work together, and this is a strong example of that. Tonight, with Council's endorsement of the Locke's Minutes of Settlement, the Ontario Land Tribunal can finally set a settlement hearing to make a final decision on a development that will revitalize the Port Dalhousie commercial core with a mixed-use residential development that will see new residences and businesses in the area, see the conservation and preservation of the Austin House Hotel, the old jail, and the Stanton House Grocery Building, and will create some great people places to this site, including Hogan's Alley. We're really looking forward to moving ahead on this development. Thank you.
And thank you, Director Cathay, to all the hard work from you and your team. It's been a busy few weeks for the planning staff. So I just want to, on behalf of Council, thank you for all the hard work, and we very much appreciate it. Thank you. Moving into discussion reports, got 5.1 Planning and Building Services, Director St. Catharines' response to Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force recommendations. I'll just have the Director of Planning and Building Services, Director Cathay, provide an overview of the report.
Thank you. Can I just confirm that there's a presentation on everyone's screen right now?
Now it is, yes.
Thank you so much. Bear with me, I'm juggling a couple screens here. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Through the Deputy Mayor to all of Council, the public and staff. On December 6th of last year, the province appointed a housing affordability task force to assess how a lack of housing supply bears responsibility for the housing affordability crisis. The task force, consisting primarily of private sector development industry representatives, crafted 55 recommendations aimed at supporting market housing affordability. The task force set a target of bringing 1.5 million new homes to market in the next 10 years. The recommendations will impact many areas of land use planning, municipal financing, cultural heritage assets, and public participation. The mandate of the task force was limited to increasing the supply of market rate rental and ownership housing, building housing supply in complete communities, reducing red tape and accelerating timelines, encouraging innovation and digital modernization, such as in the planning processes, supporting economic recovery and job creation, and balancing housing needs with protecting the environment. The mandate of the Provincial Housing Affordability Task Force does not include increasing the supply of emergency, transitional, supportive, community, or affordable housing. The task force report and its recommendations generally fall into one of 5 themes. Make the creation of housing a greater planning priority, require greater density, and broadly expand development rights. 2, reduce, shorten, and streamline planning application processes and implement province-wide zoning and urban design standards. 3, depoliticize the planning process by eliminating restrictive zoning and removing neighborhood characteristic considerations. 4, fix the Ontario Land Tribunal and prevent abuse of the appeals system. And 5, support municipalities that commit to transforming the system. The Provincial Housing Affordability Task Force had predicated their recommendations entirely on increasing housing supply as a primary factor in market housing affordability. The task force places a significant portion of culpability on the housing crisis to municipal zoning, slow approvals, costs of the development process, including fees, charges, and securities, public consultation, and political influence in the decision-making process. Of the task force's 62 recommendations, which consists of the 55 core recommendations and 7 sub-recommendations, staff have identified those that can be supported, those that are neutral or require additional information to provide that determination, and those recommendations that staff are opposed to. There is a color-coded report card of sorts that have been prepared and is attached as Appendix 2 to this report. Staff generally question the task force's fundamental premise that by broadly increasing development rights while decreasing a municipality's ability to collect payment for growth-related infrastructure, recreation, and park improvements, that would all translate to the development of market housing affordability. It is generally understood that the market will pay for what the market can bear, and that the recommendations contained within the report do not guarantee that any of the financial savings that would be enjoyed by the developer would be passed on to the end user. The City of St. Catharines has an in effect policy environment that permits, as of right, development right now of 14,390 dwelling units to accommodate an additional population of 31,390 people. The city has no ability or no authority to force the development of those units. In addition to our permissive official plan and zoning bylaw framework, staff can advise that the unlimited development rights that currently exist in our downtown have not resulted in some measurable increase in housing affordability or supply. The Housing Affordability Task Force is especially dismissive of the value that heritage conservation brings to the community. It ignores opportunities for adaptive reuse and expansion, and ignores that many heritage assets can be reused for multiple residential unit conversions. In the City of St. Catharines, there are several examples of heritage schools being converted to residential dwelling units or other mixed uses. We have heritage homes that have been converted from single units to multiple dwellings, and heritage industrial buildings being converted to residential dwellings. The city supports 2 heritage advisory committees and responsibly utilizes the tools of the Ontario Heritage Act to designate and list buildings of interest. The city is mindful of property rights and works to achieve balance, collaboration, and cooperation with property owners. The City of St. Catharines also relies on property taxes, fees, and development charges to forecast, budget, and plan for community service investment, maintenance, and replacement for the infrastructure that our residents rely on. Should the municipality's ability to collect growth-related fees from development be significantly reduced, as recommended by the task force, the city will have to make a decision to drastically reduce service levels or raise property taxes to fund growth-related costs. While staff can understand how the reduction of these fees would benefit the applicant, there is no guarantee provided that demonstrates that these cost savings would be provided down to the occupant. Furthermore, there is nothing to suggest that these recommendations would create additional housing supply and diversity over what has already been established. The City of St. Catharines prides itself on supporting its tender fruit lands and its thriving grape growing capabilities. The city and staff do not support the expansion of urban and municipal boundaries to permit development on specialty crop areas or agricultural lands. The task force's recommendation in this regard is directly contrary to the province's own Greenbelt plan and would be detrimental to the highest quality food producing soil and microclimate in the province. The city itself has taken many leadership roles in looking for opportunities to provide more housing for its residences. First, through incentivization. The city has incentivized private development investment through its community improvement plans over the year, which prioritizes brownfield remediation, affordable housing, heritage preservation, and intensification areas. The city's development charges bylaw has DC grant programs for downtown development, affordable housing, and industrial uses. The city is a recipient of the province's Streamlined Development Fund and has committed to undertaking a process improvement review with the perspective of ensuring efficient review and evaluation processes. Staff are also implementing an e-permitting system and online portal for development applications in an effort to simplify the application process and reduce costs incurred by the applicant for mileage and copies of drawings and printing, etc. The city has a very permissive official plan and zoning bylaw. The city's Garden City plan is actually fully implemented by the city's zoning bylaw, which leads to the majority of our development applications going straight to site plan, including a 30-story mixed-use tower in our downtown. The city's lowest densities residential zones permit a variety of ground-oriented housing as of right, including singles and semis, accessory dwelling units, quadplexes, and townhouses. By doing this, we are removing opportunities for neighborhood opposition to create more gentle density in established neighborhoods. Furthermore, the downtown currently enjoys a policy environment with no density cap, no height cap, and no parking minimums. The City of St. Catharines anticipated the rising cost of housing in 2017 and responded with Council's approval of a housing action plan. Among other recommendations, the report proposed to amend the official plan's condominium conversion policies, amend the zoning bylaw to address accessory dwelling units, streamline affordable development applications, amend the zoning bylaw to incorporate the possibility of inclusionary zoning, amend the community improvement plan to include an affordable housing program, participate in the regional development charge review, and advocate for the development of affordable housing projects and related programs. The city has implemented all of these actions except for an inclusionary zoning practice, which is currently under development. City Council has also created a surplus lands task force dedicated to the review of surplus municipal lands and positioning of the lands to be developed for affordable, supportive, and/or rent-geared to income housing. The city has declared 2 properties surplus so far and have entertained proposals to develop housing that supports a range of affordable, rent-geared to income and market housing on 2 properties. Recently, the city entered into an agreement with Pantera, Bethlehem Housing, and Habitat for Humanity to see the development of a former city property to 43% affordable housing, 14% social housing, and 43% market rate housing. The city maintains a very low development application appeal rate. This achievement can be attributed to constructive dialogue with applicants, the public, and commenting agencies while focusing on an outcome-based approach. And furthermore, the task force encourages land being shovel-ready. To that end, Official Plan Amendment 26 was the subject of years of growth management study, including a comprehensive land needs assessment and substantial collaboration with the region. The city-initiated Official Plan Amendment updated the Garden City Official Plan to be ready for development in line with current provincial targets. Today, I am pleased to report that a decision from the Ontario Land Tribunal was issued dismissing the appeal filed by a developer against the entirety of Official Plan Amendment 26. This will now allow properties around the city that were frozen for development to move forward. Staff have also made suggestions that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing could consider to achieve additional housing affordability. 1, regulate the Ontario Real Estate Association to discourage blind bidding, unethical pricing practices, and realtor hoarding of residential units. Disincentivize house flipping for profit through through capital gains taxes for any property bought, improved, and unoccupied, and then sold within 12 months. Assess, evaluate, and leverage all provincially owned land for residential suitability and make available for true affordable housing providers. Empower municipalities to zone for residential tenure so that we can ensure multi-residential developments have a mix of rental and ownership tenures at strategic intensification areas such as our downtowns, major transit station areas, and intensification corridors. Modify taxation systems to encourage and incentivize the construction and operation of purpose-built rental, cooperative living, truly affordable housing, and housing to support racialized communities. Undertake a meaningful Planning Act reform process with an advisory committee consisting of municipal planners and lawyers to instill consistency, clarity, and the intent of the Act. Reinstate the elimination of de novo hearings and consider decisions that are made by municipal councils. And finally, redirect any ministry budget surpluses to a fund that directly creates truly affordable housing units. Staff recommend that Council share this report and their recommendations therein to the Premier, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and other stakeholders for their consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kate, for that overview and in-depth report. I have a few councillors with some questions. I'll go to Councillor Porter first, followed by Mayor Sendzik and Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Townsend. I don't have any questions because this report was outstanding, and so was the presentation. And I just want to thank Director Kate. Like, I felt like giving a standing ovation after that. So thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Mayor Sendzik.
Just for context, and I echo what Councillor Porter had just said, is this is very much in alignment with also the big city mayors, and I imagine AMO as well. It's our staff have put a tremendous amount of effort into this, and Director Kate has taken the lead on really showing what needs to be done, not what is scratching on the edges of getting something done. So I would just have a question for Director Kate, and I don't know if it's possible to include in the recommendation, but what's your thoughts on requesting the province remove the ability to appeal a social housing development to LPAT if the council and the planning department approves of a development? And we've asked as big city mayors for this consideration, and there's a number of mayors who are pushing this, but what's your thoughts on having the province finally step up and take a role in this as well?
Through the deputy mayor to the mayor, yes, I would absolutely support that. And when I alluded to having municipal planners as part of a meaningful Planning Act reform, that is exactly one of the things that would be targeted. The lens that's missing here is affordable housing and removing barriers to affordable housing, and that can be enshrined in legislation. Right now, there's a missed opportunity to do that.
Okay, so I appreciate all if I can make an amendment to the motion that just speaks to removing the appeal process for properly approved social housing developments within. And Director Kate, if you can, work on the language before we get to the decision of council. But I think that's a statement that needs to be made. And again, I just want to say thank you to Director Kate and to council, because from a Niagara perspective, St. Catharines is leading on affordable housing and how we're trying to address the crisis. And when you look at what's happening in Ontario, we're one of the leading communities for communities of our size to address this issue as well. So I'm really proud of the work that is being done, and I applaud the staff for all the work that they're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sendzik. Just want to make sure that we've added in red. Does that encompass what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to Councillor Kushner, followed by Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I have a couple of questions. The report mentions co-op housing. We had a lot of co-op housing years ago, but we don't have any now. So what is the status of co-op housing?
through the deputy mayor to the councillor, co-op housing is something that has suffered at the hands of an unfair taxation system. What we've seen since we saw a lot of purpose-built rental and cooperative living arrangements were done through the 60s and 70s. After that time, in about the 80s, is when the taxation system changed to benefit ownership tenures. And that's why we went through a couple of decades where we didn't see purpose-built rental, we didn't see cooperative living arrangements being constructed because it wasn't financially viable to do so, and it was more difficult to get funding to create those. The province has made some changes in this area, but banks actually have been the driver for why we're seeing more purpose-built rental right now, is because they see that there will be a return on investment, and they're issuing funding to developers much more easily now who are building purpose-built rentals. But we haven't seen that uptake yet in cooperative living environments, and that's why we're suggesting to the province that through their reviews of creating more attainable and affordable housing, that they should be amending their taxation structures and legislative structures to make this a more viable, supportable, and attractive environment to move forward, to continue to develop in the future.
Thank you. And my second question is, you mentioned the elimination of de novo hearings. What does that mean?
Through the deputy mayor to the councillor, thank you for asking. Right now, our current land use planning framework in the province is we receive an application, we circulate it to all of our stakeholders, we have a public meeting, we send the developer back to make another submission, we come to council, we've gone through 4 months of process to come to council with the recommendation, and council makes a decision. They either approve, they deny, or they approve with modifications. So we've already put in months and months of work. If something gets, right now what a de novo hearing means is when something gets appealed to the tribunal, that the board approaches it like nothing has happened so far. They look at it as a brand new hearing, hearing all new evidence, and they don't take into consideration a municipal council's decision. So what we're suggesting that the province do is go back to Bill 139 language where de novo hearings were eliminated, so that tribunal hearings had to take into consideration municipal council decisions in their decision-making process, and that the arguments being contestant were down to certain details as opposed to the entire principle of development. So it's really a way to bring back a municipal voice to the tribunal decision-making process.
Okay, and my third question is, when was OPA 26 initiated, and when was it appealed?
Thank you. So through the deputy mayor to the councillor,
Sorry, Director, you're on mute.
So sorry. Through the deputy mayor to the councillor, the official plan amendment 26 was the resulting document of several years of growth management work. So this started back in 2016, 2017 with the land needs assessment work that was being undertaken in the city's review of its official plan, and then our work with the region. So this council approved official plan amendment 26 in November of 2020. It was then sent to the region for approval, and the regional council approved it in March 2021. It was appealed by the entirety of the document was appealed by a developer in April 2021. So we're essentially a year later, and the tribunal has now issued its decision that the appeal of OPA 26 has been dismissed, and we can now move forward.
Yeah, you indicate in your report that one of the recommendations is that there be the elimination of unnecessary appeals. And what do you mean by unnecessary appeals? And the reason I ask the question is that staff recommended that the poor dweller appeal be scoped, that is, evaluated on its own merits, but instead the developer held up the development of the potential development of GM lands and the development in West St. Catharines. And we had good news today or yesterday that the OPA 26 is now in force, that the Ontario Land Tribunal decided to support the position of the city. And the question I have is, would that be considered an unnecessary appeal? Because it was very clear that that appeal had no merit, that the council, city council, regional council, city staff, and regional staff all supported OPA 26. And yet we had to go through a very onerous and expensive process, which of course increases the price of housing. So would that be one of your components of eliminating unnecessary appeals?
Through the chair to the councillor, the way I have it worded on the staff recommendations is to eliminate de novo hearings. I'm not sure that I said get rid of unnecessary appeals, but when we were speaking about meaningful Planning Act reform and getting rid of de novo appeals, I think essentially it would help assist us in weeding out some appeals that may be more or vexatious or punitive in nature. The mayor's amendment to the recommendation also addresses that, like if we were to eliminate appeals that were NIMBY-based appeals based on affordable housing projects or other matters like that. There's an aspect of addressing legislation around, there's a canyon between removing people's democratic appeal rights versus setting proper development process moving forward. So it would have to be done correctly, and it shouldn't be up to one individual to say that they agree or disagree with the foundation of an appeal. But I think that through a proper reform process, there would be opportunities to provide criteria in weeding things out that might be vexatious in nature or overly punitive. In terms of the appeal that you're speaking to, I think it would have been more helpful from the start if it was related to a site-specific appeal as opposed to citywide.
And is that one of the recommendations, that the appeal be site-specific?
The recommendation is to undertake a Planning Act reform.
Okay,
it's unrealistic for us to go back to the province with every single scenario that we've faced as a community, but there's certainly some learned practices that we could all move forward with.
And the last comment I would make, I'm very supportive of the argument to continue with some type of development fees, because it's based on equity that the developers, when they build, they have to pay the full cost, as we did who are fortunate to own homes have done so in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Going to Councillor Dodge.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to Director of Planning. I tend to agree. I think that, this is something that our staff has spent many, many hours and probably many more to come, because this is a huge issue, not only for St. Catharines, but all of Ontario. So I just wanted to congratulate on, the hard work that goes into this, because I know that many hours were spent. I don't know whether there's a comment or a question, but when we look at all of the things that we put forward here, are we missing a social component on what we're trying to do with this? And I mean, at the end of the events of the affordable housing coming to fruition, on social programs that we have for people that we're going to be providing housing for, such as, our medical, dental, recreational facilities, anything that would fall under that scope. How are we going to be providing those types of things for people as we're going through this process?
Through the Deputy Mayor to the Councillor, I think I would take a one step back from that, from saying just for residents of affordable housing, but maybe for all residents.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The way the current policy environment works in Ontario is we take our targets from the province. So the province sets populations and job targets, and they allocate them to the regions. The region then allocates it to the local area municipalities. We then decide as a municipal level where we're going to put that population, and we set it in our official plan. And official plan amendment number 26 was our latest update to that process, so that we're in compliance to a 25-year forecast on where our growth is going to go. The official plan document is really the strategy for the development of the community over the next 20 to 25 years. So what it does is it tells our capital engineering teams where we're going to be putting more intensification or which types of land use, so that they know when they're doing capital project upgrades or infrastructure renewal, they know what we're planning for. Just the same as our population targets are also helpful for our CRCS team in developing their parks master plans and perhaps what hierarchies of parks they want to offer, what the usability rates are going to be, the ratio and the populations for green space. It's the official plan sets out how we're going to manage our population, and then that also helps inform our other operational departments in how they're going to build, and then through municipal works maintain those features. In terms of service delivery or for affordable housing or medical, that lands at the region or the province. But again, our growth targets, they come from immigration from the federal government or they come from the province, and then they base their annual budget allocations on where they see those populations going. So if the province is expecting a greater amount of immigration to settle in a certain area, then they should be accommodating through their medical budgets appropriately. But I can't speak to it much more further than that.
Okay, thank you. I know that we talked about this earlier today in more detail, but I just was thinking while you were speaking, are we looking anywhere at getting any funding for those types of things that we're going to be, needing to provide for our citizens?
Through the deputy mayor to the councillor, the city's development charges bylaw sets out what growth-related development fees we can accept for future growth, and that would accommodate for new recreation and parks and things like that are growth-related. In terms of other provincial funding opportunities, I know our staff have always kept an eye to provincial grant opportunities and have been quite successful at implementing and improving some of our public areas, but generally, very, very roughly, development charges will be paying for or at least subsidizing growth-related development in the future.
Thank you. And if I could just take a couple of minutes of, I wanted to give a little bit of background on what AMO is doing. I know that the mayor had said about the large urban mayors, and AMO, they actually have done a blueprint for action for housing affordability. And with this, they came up with 12 principles in mind. And AMO has developed a blueprint for action and outlines nearing 90 recommendations separated into levels of government, whether it be federal, provincial, and municipal, and the development sector, private, nonprofit, and cooperative. So the recommendations are grouped into one of 6 categories: collaboration and coordination, funding and incentives, improving outcomes for people, innovative streamlining processes, and workforce development and supply chain. And some of the things our staff have come up with, as well as what AMO came up with. And it's great that everyone is looking at this. I mean, this is not just a St. Catharines issue, it's a cross Canada type of issue. And I just wanted to share a little fact. I mean, I've got pages of things on the different things that they did, but there is one fact that I thought was very interesting, that in 2018, the municipality spent $2 billion of taxpayers' money to have housing and other incentives provided to our citizens. So I thought that was a pretty interesting fact, and quite a high number of what the municipalities have taken out of their taxpayers to move forward with housing issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. I have Councillor Miller.
Thank you, and apologies if anyone hears Encanto playing in the background here. I did have a question, and thank you, I should say, for the report, and thank you for the presentation. I think the task force came to the conclusion that they started out with, so it was hardly surprising, and I don't think, I think it's incredibly naive to think we're going to develop or build our way out of the current housing crisis, which this seems to generally suggest. My question is around, we, as you know, endorse the idea of having a vacant home tax, and I'm curious if that came up at all in the housing affordability report.
Through the chair to the councillor, it did not.
I guess maybe I should ask before I say anything else. What is staff's feeling on that? That was a couple of years ago that we discussed that at City Council. Is that a viable recommendation for the task force to consider?
Through the chair to the councillor, my recollection is that this council's motion on looking at a vacant homes tax was actually suggested that the region take that on. And I'm sorry, I don't have an update on where that process followed out for. So without being able to see the evaluation, the analysis, and the recommendations that came out of that report, I'm just not in a position to say at this time.
Well, I think the region is where good housing ideas go to die, so I don't think it went anywhere up there. I would like to make an amendment based on this council passing it, that we include that in our recommendations. And that's it. Thanks again.
All right, thank you, Councillor Miller. Just make sure we have that in the motion. And do I have any other speakers, questions? No. I'll just sum up by thanking Director, I have Mayor Sendzik.
Just a point of clarification on the vacant home tax. If I can, maybe for the next meeting, if Director Douglas or Adam Smith can provide an update, because I believe Councillor Miller that I had asked that question about the vacant home tax and where it was in the region. And so there is some information. So if we can get that, and maybe the before approving this, if the direction could be to for staff to come back and provide an update on the vacant home tax, because I just before we make a decision, because I think there's some nuances there. That's all.
That's fine with me. I trust we can always send that recommendation afterwards.
Okay, so do you want to change the wording on that then, or just take that out for now and have the or just remove it for now, and then we'll have Mayor Sendzik maybe follow up with Councillor Miller. Is that appropriate?
It'll be a direction to staff, to the chair. It'll be a direction to staff to follow up on that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just thank Director Cathay for the hard work. Obviously, municipalities have. Oh, I have one more person. I have Councillor McPherson.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the Director of Planning, is there an update on the vacant building tax, or the vacant, is there a registry, a vacant home registry?
Through the Deputy Mayor to the councillor, staff are currently working on a vacant home registry bylaw that we'd like to bring forward to council. Right now, we're trying to figure out timing and where it fits on the agenda, because we're probably going to have a public meeting with that. But right now, we're targeting early May.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McPherson. I'll just jump in and send my appreciation and thank you again to Director Cathay and her team for this hard work. This council has done a great job showing what we can do from the municipal side of things, and I do and am very much in favor of the concept of empowering municipalities, but we have to do more. We've shown what we can do from our side of things, whether it be through using surplus lands, whether it be including community improvement program investment. It's going to be important, though, for us to continue to call on our MPs and MPPs for higher levels of government to do more as well. So, but thank you to Director Cathay for all your hard work. Thank you. And I just need a mover and a seconder for the motion. I have Mayor Sendzik and Councillor Porter. And call the question.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, we have 5.2, Planning and Building Services. We have Director of St. Catharines' response to Bill 109, supplemental to report PBS 059-2022. I'll just go over again to Director of Planning and Building Services, Director Kate, who will provide an overview of the report.
Thank you. And through the chair, can someone please confirm that the presentation is showing?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So good evening once again, Mayor Sendzik, members of council, staff, and the public. The purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of Bill 109, the More Homes for Everyone Act, and staff's assessment on the proposed changes to the Planning Act and Development Charges Act. So the preceding report that was just discussed, PBS 059-2022, was titled St. Catharines' Response to the Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force Recommendations. That set out staff's position and the known implications of the Housing Affordability Task Force recommendations should they be implemented by the provincial government. That report was published on March 29 of last week, and then on March 30th, the province announced Bill 109, the More Homes for Everyone Act. The bill sets out to amend several pieces of legislation, including the Development Charges Act, the New Home Construction Licensing Act, the Ontario New Home Warranties Act, and the Planning Act. The bill is posted at the Environmental Registry of Ontario, and the commenting period is open until April 29th of this year. After reviewing the amendments for the Planning Act and Development Charges Act, staff note that there are some amendments that can be supported. So should Bill 109 be enacted, as of January 1, 2023, the timeline to issue site plan approvals will be extended from 30 to 60 days. Due to the very detailed nature of site plan documents, including engineering, landscaping, and architectural plans, and the number of stakeholders who participate in this process, the additional process time is absolutely warranted and supported. The bill also seeks to establish regulatory authority for municipalities to prescribe complete application requirements for site plan applications. Staff support this inclusion as a way of ensuring that site plan applications are comprehensive, functional, and contribute to our city building objectives. The weight of this clause also helps us to dictate when the 60-day timeframe for site plan approval would begin. This change will result in better development. Bill 109 also proposes to establish a one-time discretionary authority to reinstate draft plans of subdivision that have lapsed within the past 5 years. The proposed legislation provides that if an approval of subdivision lapses before an extension is given, the approval authority may deem the approval to not have lapsed if less than 5 years have passed. Because this option would entirely be at the discretion of the municipality, mainly council, staff can support this change. The bill introduces a new tool to expedite zoning called the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator. It sets out a process where council must pass a resolution requesting the minister to issue or amend the zoning of a property. It sets out notice requirements to the public and that stakeholder consultation is required. While the CIHA, or Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator, cannot apply to lands within the Greenbelt area, staff are concerned that under these new regulations, it would mean that it does not have to conform to the provincial policy statement, any provincial plans, including the growth plan or Niagara Escarpment plan, or a regional or city official plan. This new tool is in addition to the current minister's zoning order permissions. The difference between them is that the CIHA is requested by the council of the municipality, where an MZO can be issued at the minister's discretion. The next items assist with transparency and are supported by staff. Bill 109 proposes to require municipalities to publicly report on development applications and approvals. And additionally, the proposed legislation seeks to require those municipalities with the community benefit charge bylaw to undertake a complete review, including public consultation on the CBC bylaw every 5 years. Staff support both initiatives. However, we do note it would be advantageous for the province to standardize the metrics that they are seeking to report. They're seeking reporting on to ensure consistency across all 444 Ontario municipalities. The province is proposing to establish regulatory authority to prescribe what cannot be required as a condition of subdivision approval. Draft plan of subdivisions and their conditions of approvals are very context sensitive and they're based on feedback with numerous stakeholders, including the developer as well as the public. Without understanding at this time which conditions the province is considering prohibiting, staff are cautious about what the implications could be on the municipality. While the City of St. Catharines does not undertake many plans of subdivision, being that we're a city that's focused on intensification, but plans of subdivision could be appropriate for land assembly development that require future public infrastructure. So limitations on types of subdivision conditions could impact the municipality's ability to meet certain city building initiatives. We just don't have enough information at this time. Bill 109 also proposes to provide the minister with discretion on whether to refer municipal comprehensive review official plan amendments or new official plans to the tribunal for either a recommendation or whether the minister can approve or modify it for a final decision on the tribunal. Given the current backlog at the Ontario Land Tribunal, it's not at all apparent how this would result in a more expeditious process, nor how this would bring additional housing units online. Furthermore, right now, developers do not have the ability to appeal municipal comprehensive reviews, which are essentially bringing municipal official plans into conformity with provincial documents. So adding an additional appeal right here would delay development process. Bill 109 proposes to give the minister authority to suspend the time period review for an official plan amendment. Staff are unclear what would necessitate this request to the minister and how this process would be administered, and we don't really see it being an efficient use of process. When the city enters into certain types of development agreements, such as subdivisions and site plan agreements, the city requires the landowner to post securities to guarantee that the works that they're undertaking will be done in accordance with approved plans, as per the conditions of the agreement and to city standards. In the instance where the developer does not undertake the appropriate works or installs insufficient works, the municipality will utilize securities, which is money that the developer puts forward to secure their work, to undertake those works ourselves to city standards using the developer's money. The most common tool utilized for development securities are letters of credits issued by financial institutions. A letter of credit acts as basically a line of credit to a developer. The debt is applied in full as an assurance should the bank need to provide funds to a municipality for defaulting on an agreement. So because of this, the amount of a letter of credit actually reduces the ability that developers have to finance numerous development projects. Municipalities prefer letters of credit because the issuing financial institution has committed to advancing the funds to the city should the other party default. A surety bond is guaranteed by a third party, often an insurance company, to assume a defaulting party's obligations. But surety bonds do not have the same carrying costs or financial burden as a letter of credit, and as such, it's much more attractive to developers. However, the burden then comes to the municipality in attempting to access or cash a surety bond. It's very resource intensive. It requires substantial legal intervention, and the result necessarily does not guarantee that the municipality will receive the full amount necessary secured against the works. Bill 109 provides that the minister may can make a regulation authorizing landowners and applicants to choose which security they provide. Given the city's past experience with trying to collect on surety bonds, staff do not support their use for development securities. Probably the most problematic aspect of Bill 109 are the changes to the timeframes, and basically the province is proposing legislation to financially penalize municipalities for not meeting development review timelines. These changes are intended to apply to development applications made on or after January 1st of 2023, but essentially there are set timelines that if a decision is not made within timeframes, then an amount of the application fee would be refunded back to the developer, either 50, 75, or 100%, depending on how many days. These amendments to the Planning Act, if enacted, will not have the intended effect of expediting the development approvals process. The majority of delays in the application review process are attributed to external factors out of the city's control. For example, once planning staff circulate a development application for review and undertake an evaluation, the comments are provided back to an applicant. It is completely out of our control on how long the applicant takes to supply a second submission. If this is enacted, it would actually be advantageous for the developer to delay their own approvals to get a refund on their application fee. Furthermore, some applications require review and comment from provincial ministries, such as the Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Park, or other relevant entities such as conservation authorities, Ontario Hydro, utility companies, etc. Delays attributed to these entities have not been addressed. As we saw earlier tonight, the most successful developments are ones that are collaborated on by the applicant, the city, and the public. If these timeframes and financial penalties are enacted as currently proposed, municipal planning departments will have no choice but to recommend more refusals, which will not only shut down these important conversations, but also contribute to a substantial increase in appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal. For applications that have further merit, staff will make recommendations for conditional site plan approvals or expand our use of holding bylaws, which will result in similar timelines for the developers to approval, completely reliant on their efforts to clear these conditions. This legislative proposal, if enacted, will have the reverse effect of what was intended by the provincial government. Reducing revenue opportunities for a municipality will only result in less staff being able to undertake development application review and therefore increase the burden on the taxpayer to subsidize developer work. Should Bill 109 be enacted in this regard, there could be substantial financial impacts to the planning and building services operating budget, especially if we were to issue refunds to developers for application processing delays. And additionally, the legal and clerk services and operating budget would also need to be increased to respond to the development applications, tighter timeframes, and to adjudicate these matters at the tribunal. The province underestimates that the impact to the municipalities would be limited. They suggest that it would be one-time upfront costs associated with learning the changes, additional ongoing costs associated with workload, and that municipalities would need to hire more staff to process applications faster. Planning staff have previously communicated to Council that current staffing complements are critically insufficient to handle existing workloads. Staff have shared with Council in November 2021 that the planning section was already short by at least 6 planners. That analysis was based on comparator municipality staffing and a workload analysis. Planning staff do not currently meet legislative timeframes. The quantity and complexity of applications continues to increase, and the Bill 109 proposal to financially penalize municipalities for not finalizing official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and site plan approvals within certain timeframes is alarming and counterproductive to the province's stated goals of expediting approvals. Should this regulation survive past April 29 of this year, planning, development, engineering, and legal staffing resources would need to be substantially increased. The report itself recommends that Council authorize staff to submit comments to the ERO based on the items in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cote, and I will, if councillors have any questions, I'll open the floor. And I've got Councillor Garcia, followed by Mayor Sendzik.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and I would like to join all my colleagues in thanking the Director of Planning for all her work. It seems like the whole meeting has been her answering questions, but anyway, I think those are excellent comments on the Bill 109, which I support. My only question is, with the comments on the task force report, you recommended forwarding them to a whole list of people, whereas these you're saying only go to one group. Should they not be widely distributed? Your comments on Bill 109?
Through the chair to the councillor, thank you. The task force recommendations report was never intended by design for community or public input. It was never put out for consultation. There was never a deadline attached to it for submission comments. But because of the scope of it and the impacts to municipalities, so many different groups have taken interest, and the mayor spoke to that earlier. The Ontario Big Mayors Caucus, OPPI, MFAO, Roma, everybody under the sun, because it impacted so many people. But until we actually have legislation in place, we can't, there's a reaction to that. So right now we have Bill 109. We are reacting to it, and the proper procedure here would be to file our comments with the ERO. Previous to COVID, we had seen quite a few bills come down the pipes with transitions to the Planning Act, where we had timeframes to comment, and then they were enacted the very next day. So it remains to be seen what our feedback, how our feedback will be accepted, but that is the process that's been identified by the province here.
Thank you for that. And would it not be appropriate to at least copy our Niagara MPPs in your comments?
Through the chair to the councillor, I would support that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I would add that to the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. We'll make sure that is added. I have Mayor Sendzik.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, just a quick question on the. And I agree with Director Kitte's assessment on the cumbersome nature of rebating, and it's been a big point of contention at the Ontario Big City Mayors as well, because the complexity of it. Is there, and I guess this is a response back to the Director, is there a way where instead of the province reacting to what the development community may be saying, is there a way that we can bring in a way of measuring our outputs that are agreed upon between the development community and the city, so that there's a better understanding of the timelines and some of the complexities? Because I do often hear there is, for a very host of reasons, including lack of staffing, there is delays that are taking place. So is there a way that we can say to the province, instead of coming up with a rebate program that I think would be just too complicated and at risk for abuse, that we can do something more local nature that would have service expectations and customer service metrics built into it that would address some of these issues?
Through the deputy mayor to the mayor, thank you. Many planning departments have grappled with this. This isn't a new issue. The Planning Act, since at least 1990, has always had timeframes for the municipalities and sets out the process that we must be undertaken for the evaluation of development applications. What it doesn't take into consideration is the timeframes that are outside of our control. So how long it's sitting with a commenting partner, how long it's sitting with the applicant. We do not have any systems in place that start and stop the clocks and then attribute those times, and it would have to be a manual exercise, and that would be labor intensive as well. We are hopeful that once we have the portal up and running, that we can go back and look into our Amanda system to see if there is a module that we can add that might help us log some of those things. So if an applicant makes a complaint that they haven't gotten their their approval back within 120 days, we can go back and say, yes, but out of those 120 days, 80 of it was sitting with your designer. So we would like to be able to get there. We're still working on some of our foundational IT work first, but that's certainly something that I would like to get towards. But right now it's too labor intensive to have staff calculating out all the days that they're working on this, that, and the other thing, and how long it's with an applicant or a designer.
So, and through the chair, and I appreciate that response, and I think maybe that's what could be a recommendation in the future back to the provinces, that while we appreciate what the province is trying to do with that rebate, and it's trying to build into the system accountability, there's got to be different ways of building accountability to the system, because you are correct. What the big city mayors were talking about is that the province isn't accounting for its own delays that take place, whether it's MTO, Ministry of the Environment, NPCA. They could be another commenting agency. The region is a commenting agency. They can all delay the process. And where does the accountability lie? So I think what I've heard routinely from the development community is there has to be more accountability for all parties within this process. And currently there's too much, it's your fault, or it's your fault, or it's your fault. We got to push the faults aside and say, how do we come up with an accountability process so that all parties, all levels of government and the private sector are working to the same objectives, and they all know what accountability looks like. And I think that's the missing piece, and I don't think a rebate program is going to get us there. So I appreciate you taking the time to explain that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Senzik. I have Councillor Williamson, followed by Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you to the Director of Planning. Under the subheading where it talks about environmental sustainability implications, it suggests again that there isn't any. And I suppose that we kind of have to read between the lines. But if we rush through development applications, maybe cut some corners, I get the impression, and I suspect you might be hearing this from not only environmental groups but other land use planners across the province, that there's potential for us to develop in an environmentally inappropriate way onto either agricultural lands. You did mention the green belt, or even onto environmentally sensitive lands. Is that a sentiment that has been discussed?
Through the chair to the councillor, it was never the planning department's intent to cut corners on review. What we were speaking to is that this would actually result in more conditional approvals, or site plans that have conditions attached to them, or holding bylaws, where we would still hold applicants to the same standards. It's just it would be perhaps be more back-ended. So like now, if we get an application in and it doesn't meet city standards in terms of, say, stormwater or landscaping, we can send that back to the applicant and say, you know, these are our comments in these regards, you know, please make modifications to your plans. Because the timeframes have been cemented with financial penalties, our response back is going to be more like, sure, you can have your approval if you do A, B, C, D, E, and F, which are all things that they would have had to do anyway. So that's why I'm saying there's no time savings here. We're still going to be holding developers to this to the same standard. It's not a time savings for them. It's just going to change it'll change process, but it won't change time.
Right. Sorry, maybe I didn't phrase the question properly. I was directing it more towards the province, not locally. But the overall implications could possibly be that we do make some compromises where we shouldn't be in terms of protecting environmentally sensitive land and agricultural land, that kind of thing. So that I wasn't directing it at your department. I was just more province wide.
Thank you. So through the chair, I don't think Bill 109 reflects that as much. I was pleased to see that the new community infrastructure and housing accelerator specifically said that it didn't apply to the Greenbelt land, so that was helpful. I think it applied more to the task force report, where there was a very concerning section discussing shifting municipal and urban boundaries to accommodate development, and that was where we raised a very large red flag over environmental concerns. So I'm not sure that Bill 109 picked the same thing up.
Great, and thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. I have Councillor Dodge, followed by Councillor Porter.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I just have a comment. for AMO's perspective, they had so many questions. They haven't really made any comments back to us yet. But I just wanted, and I don't know whether the director would like to do this or not, but they have registered to go to appear at the standing committee on Monday. And I don't know if it would be helpful to send this report on to them so that maybe they can bring some of our questions forward at that time.
Through the chair to the councillor, absolutely, I would support that change to the recommendation.
Thank you very much. I'd be pleased to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. We'll have that added in. And I have Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the Director of Planning. Wouldn't it make more sense if the province wants to expedite planning approvals? And I'm sure we're not the only city. It looks like we do have a bit of a crisis given all of the development interest, not just through like bigger planning applications, but committee of adjustment applications that take up our planning staff's time. And given that a lot of municipalities seem to struggle with IT resources, wouldn't it make more sense for the province to look at helping municipalities improve their IT infrastructure or standardizing some kind of approach for tracking these types of developments? Because I don't know if Amanda is like the standard software for every municipality or not. Would a grant or something or some kind of direct funding from the province to help actual planning staff instead of, this seems like just downloading and putting more work and responsibility onto planning staff without any funding, any resources, and like you said, doesn't fix the problem. I'm just wondering if OPPI or anybody else has like come up with any kind of idea like that as a recommendation.
Through the chair to the councillor, absolutely, staff would support any type of financial investment into a municipal IT system that would support all property-based work that the organization does. Amanda is a program that is used by multiple GTHA municipalities. It's been in place for at least 30 years, and it's a foundational program. But there are others out there. There's probably about 2 or 3 different programs that are being used alone within Niagara region. There's City View and Cloud Permit and Land Manager and others. So we have asked the province to do through these reports is to standardize what metrics they want us to report on. They're very consistent at the building permit side. They tell us what type of permit reporting we need to do on a quarterly basis, but all they tell the municipalities is, well, you need to monitor your growth, but they don't tell us what metrics they want us to monitor. So we do it through building permits because that's our real-time data. So if the province is really devoted to metrics and measurement, then they should apply a consistent standard to its 444 municipalities. And furthermore, if they want to have real-time reporting, then yes, they should either invest in or develop a province-wide system for doing that. There has not been any conversations that I'm aware of that show that they're moving in that direction.
I don't know if we need to sort of like direct you with a motion, but I'm just, if you were willing to bring something like that up, I believe that there's probably missed opportunities from the province's side not coming out with these types of standards, because I don't even think the province problem they're trying to solve is really well defined, because they don't have the right information if they're not collecting the right metrics and really figuring out where the problems lie. And I'm not quite sure they were really spending the time actually listening, and metrics are key. So if that wanted to be something you would want to think about adding as a possible solution as well, that I think would actually benefit us. I don't know if that needs to be part of a motion, but or when you're making these, you're making these comments back to yourself, right?
So through the chair to the councillor, the Bill 109 report that's in front of you right now, the suggestion is to make comments to the province based on this legislation. So in terms of your request about consistent recording metrics, I think that might have actually been captured under the Housing Task Force recommendations that were on page 7 of that report that we were putting up. So we might have kind of caught it. Otherwise, it may be a conversation worth having at AMO this summer.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Councillor Porter. And I don't see any other hands up. If I could just ask Evan to put the slide back up with the impact. I think it was the second last one. The slide from the slideshow. Oh, Director Kate would have it. There we go. So I look at this and it definitely, it shares and tells a story. You look at the number of planning applications in 2020 and then in 2021. At first it tells us that everyone wants to buy and live and build in St. Catharines, and why wouldn't they? Because we are the best city in Ontario. But it tells a second story as well with our planning staff. And my question is, I guess it would go through to the CAO. And what is the plan to bring our average planning staff complement back up into comparison with these other municipalities?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very good timing. I did not cue this question. We've actually been meeting as a senior leadership team on this specific issue, not just planning, but all development side and all staffing. I am intending to bring that report to council in June to go and talk about all of the associated issues that we talked in November, as well as trying to take a proactive stance as a corporation to be able to meet a lot of these both development related pressures, but also council objectives and trying to achieve what council wants us to be as a community. So that will be June to do that prior to the budget development.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for putting it back up. I'll have the, I had to keep you on your toes, because I know Director Kate has been doing a lot of work today, so. But I'll have the, if I can have the motion staff recommendation put on the floor, please, and I need a councillor to move it and second it. I'll have Councillor McPherson, and seconded by Councillor Williamson. Okay, and that council authorized staff to provide comments on the Environmental Registry of Ontario in accordance with the recommendations contained within report PBS 067-2022 prior to April 29th, 2022. And I know that Councillor Garcia, Councillor Dodge both had some amendments that they wanted to add into the motion, the recommendation. Oh, you got Councillor, okay, yeah, Councillor Garcia's is there, and I believe Councillor Dodge wanted to add one as well. And Amo, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so.
Sorry, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Could we just have that staff, if they're able to send it through as quickly as possible, as AMO is meeting on Monday?
Yes, yep, I've got a nod from the CAO, so yes.
Thank you for that.
All right, I'll call the question.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Harris. Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, and we'll move on to the reading of the bylaw 6.1, motion that the bylaw list of the council agenda be read at a first time, considered and passed. A bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its special meeting held on 7th day of April 2022. One reading with respect to confirming the proceedings of the meeting held on April 7th, 2022, and that it be signed and executed by the Deputy Mayor and the City Clerk. Can I just have a mover? Councillor Phillips, Councillor Dodge. And just all in favor, show of hands. And that's carried. And we have a motion that there be no further items of business and that this meeting be adjourned. Can I have a mover? And the seconder, I got Councillor Garcia, Mayor Senzik, and all in favor, show of hands. And that is carried. enjoy the rest of the evening. Be well, stay healthy, get healthy, and enjoy your rest of the week.